Thank you, Phil. So we're going to talk AI and automation this morning. So this is going to be very exciting. So we're going to start by bringing up Bipasha Chiu, who is the Vice President of Business Delivery Management for the LCBO. And if you're not from Ontario, Liquor Control Board of Ontario. All right. And then second, Cari, Covent. She's the Vice President of Intelligent Automation at Canadian Tire. Come on up. And then Tracy Dallaire, who's the Senior Director for Technology Integration in Mohawk College. Where's Tracy? There's. All right, so please come on up and join us here. All right. So we've talked a lot about AI throughout the event, and it's obviously one of those technologies that is billed as probably one of the most significant in terms of driving change and allow us to do things differently for our customers as we kind of progress forward. So we're going to talk about AI, and we're going to talk about automation as well. And I think the two kind of go hand in hand. Very few Canadian companies are doing sort of the deep learning, very, very advanced AI at this point, examples of that. But for a lot of us, we are using AI to help us automate things and really drive it forward. So maybe by show of hand, who's engaged in any kind of AI pilots? All right, so we've got lots of folks in this area, so this is great. So why don't we start here, Bipasha, and just brief introduction, who you are, what kind of projects you're engaged in, and we kind of go quickly through that.
Great, thank you. So in our role, in my team's role, we have the responsibility to deliver on almost every project, major initiative within the LCBO. And these days, we're going through quite a large business transformation within the LCBO. We went from a pure retail play for B2C, go to the store, pick up your alcohol, to e-commerce recently, and we've now expanded to sell alcohol in grocery stores. So we've got now a large B2B practice that's opening up. So through that transformation, everything we're realizing is technology-based. Mm-hmm. And I would say we are on, as we're transforming the business, as we're transforming technology, so we have systems that are more than 30 years old. So this is a very large transformation. So when you think about innovation in AI, that's like leaps beyond where we started. But I think what the teams are recognizing is that we don't need to take the stepwise approach. We can jump through decades of technology. And I would say certainly in chatting with Tracy this morning and Cari last night, we're certainly on the early stages of the journey. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that we're doing from a proof of concept, test and learn, and recognizing challenges when you take an innovation approach and how to scale on that. Mm-hmm. So I would say we're early days, yeah. Especially compared to some of the journeys that Tracy and Cari have been on.
All right. Excellent. So we'll go to Cari here.
Is my mic working? Yes. So I lead what we call the Intelligent Automation practice. We've branded it CTX, which stands for Canadian Tire Exponential. And really the mission behind the practice is to drive revenue and margin and cost and save costs through AI technologies. And the way we look at AI technologies is it's everything from, robotic process automation to data science to neuroscience to machine learning. And what we try to do is focus on the major problems within the organization. We're a separate business unit and essentially a service provider to the banners, being Sport Chek, Marks, and Canadian Tire Retail. And we try to focus on the major problems, use the diverse skill set within my team to solve for them. We build it to a level where it's productionized, and then we pass it back to the business to run and maintain. And ultimately, what we try to do through each development opportunity is we try to take what we've done and then scale it across the banners. So generally, we only work on opportunities that can be scaled versus something that would just be specific to one banner.
Very good.
Great. Thanks very much. Tracy Dallaire. I'm with Mohawk College. So we have about 30,000 students at any time at Mohawk, and our focus right now in the technology space, and that's AI, IoT, machine learning, cyber, all those kind of areas, is to build the collective competency of our faculty, our students, but also our industry and our communities. My role at Mohawk is working with all the academic and applied research areas to integrate all of these innovative digital technologies. And that's everywhere from what are viewed as traditionally technology areas like engineering and computer science, but also our law and enforcement programs, our healthcare programs, our aviation programs, early childhood education, all of them. We have a number of initiatives underway around the college, and they're all industry intensive. So we have at any given time about 250 companies we're working with doing applied research. And applied research, which is a bit different than at a university setting, is where we're taking a business challenge of a company, applying technology to it, but maybe in a bit of a different way. And students and faculty get to work on that project working with the industry. So we have some examples we're working on in AI and process automation in healthcare with seniors in place, working with Alzheimer's patients. We're doing some work with some pharmaceutical companies in that area. We're doing quite a bit of work with manufacturers, ArcelorMittal, DeFasco, and Stelco, some crane companies, and then doing some initial work in the aerospace sector with aircraft maintenance companies. So, and that's where we're wrapping around the business challenge, a number of technologies. It's usually IoT and AI and process automation or quality machine learning, and kind of layer a bit of cyber on top of that. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. So I'd like to start with maybe Cari, in terms of your experience and where you started with Canadian Tire. So what business processes or use cases did you start with, and what was the thinking about why those were selected?
Sure. So the journey's been an interesting one. We established this practice in September of 2017, and the idea behind it was we had just finished a PeopleSoft Financials implementation, which was the first time that we had an enterprise financial platform. And as we were kind of winding that down, it was very obvious that there was an opportunity to overlay the platform with some automation. And so we started, essentially went to the CFO and said, can we get a little bit of seed money to, we think we can really, now that we've got this modern platform in place, we think we can add a layer of RPA on top and really cut down your costs going forward. And so obviously after a large multi-million-dollar PeopleSoft implementation, he was very happy to see some costs go down. So he essentially gave us some money and said, and this was in September, and said, you need to break even by the end of the year. So us finding the right use cases to do that was really, really important. Where we started was truly about driving efficiencies through headcount, and we obviously started in finance. What we quickly found, and I would say within the first 2 months, was that was going to be a really hard path. And it was going to be a hard path because there's not enough people at Canadian Tire anyway, compared to a large bank, that are doing the same job. There's a lot of people that are doing manual jobs, but not, we don't have the numbers of, 50, 100 people doing the same job. We might have 10. So what we decided was that in addition to driving efficiency through automation, we should also look at, we called it driving effectiveness, which was all about driving revenue. And we were able to find a use case very, very quickly. And it was more about, the use case was more about automating a process that existed, but taking it one step further. And that was the key. So it was, this is the job that people had always done, but once, for example, the report landed on their desk, they weren't able to do much with it because they just didn't have time. So as we were going through the process design, we sort of said, well, why aren't you doing anything with the report? And the question was, the answer was, I don't have time. So what we were able to do was automate that report and essentially send personalized emails, super simple, to our dealer community, which ultimately reminded them of products that they did not order that past week. That was our kind of home run and our entry into where we are today, because that actually generated tens of millions of dollars for the corporation. And so through that, once we had the seed money sort of further extended for 2018, we were then able to bring in the analytics, the data science, the machine learning, and essentially provide large solutions for the organization.
Yeah, that's always a great way to start, by bringing in tons of new money.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get back to what the next use cases were a little later in terms of that path forward. Maybe Bipasha, if you want to give us a sense of where LCBO is starting in this AI automation journey.
Sure. Yeah, we're much younger in the process. So one of the things that we started in 2018 was an innovation lab. So we built out an innovation lab in Waterloo using kind of Google's old space, just to kind of generate, and we hire co-op students into there. So again, to bring in some very different thinking, low-cost approach for co-op students and a manager over there. And we would, what we've used is that's our test bed for trying different proofs of concept. And one of the ones that they started to, and it kind of talks to kind of what we've learned, is that they were looking at a sales forecasting tool, a predictive sales forecasting tool. They started with a few stores, a few SKUs. And, the typical is use historical data, use your own company's events. They obviously wanted to introduce climate data, weather data, and external events. But what we found very quickly is that the quality of our product data was very limiting. In the past, product attributes, especially in the alcohol beverage industry, you would have product description, product name, and some supply chain dimension data. And that's good enough to kind of load the product, get going with it. But once you go into e-commerce and once you start to want to leverage from an AI perspective, all of a sudden the data becomes absolutely critical. So one of the things that they were trying is, okay, what are the external events? Well, let's say there's a show on organic products. Well, to be able to even pull what are our organic wines, we realized we don't have a good base of data. So one of the things now we're doing is working with the liquor boards across Canada to say, how do we get at the product data rather than each of us, because we're in a non-compete industry, and we're leveraging a lot of the same suppliers, rather than each of us spending countless hours improving our data, how do we centralize that? How do we ask the suppliers to take ownership for it and develop a national product registry so that the suppliers are accountable for ensuring that the data is clean, and as liquor boards across the province, we can leverage that data, know that it's accurate, and not have to go in and chase all of the suppliers to kind of improve that. So we realized on that particular initiative we can't scale it because we just don't have the product data and the information and kind of the data foundation that we needed to be able to scale it. So we're trying to find those use cases that give us value but can also scale, given some of the transformation that we still have to go through, because we've got a lot of technology foundational work to do that we're in the midst of.
Right. Tracy, maybe a couple of examples that you've seen that have, in your mind, had the most significant impact in those specific industries where you guys are engaged.
Yeah. So a couple of examples of some of the things we're working on, and faculty at Mohawk have been sort of at this for the last 3-4 years, and we've over the last 18 months have had a significant investment in a lot of technology. So we have some projects right now we're working on for seniors who are in either caring in place at home or in retirement villages of some sort, to look at falls. And so there's AI databases of what a fall is and the velocity and the speed and what that looks like. And we're putting sensors in that then, if a person falls, and we have mannequins as well as actors that are simulating this, they're simulating what a fall is, and it's teaching the AI engine of what a fall is, and then it's triggering a signal to the care professionals. And if you have a senior caring in place at home, it would signal it to you, let's say as a family member, or it would signal it if you're in a long-term care facility to the very lean nursing or care staff. And with the aging population, there is also a really significant decline in the amount of personal support workers or care providers. So this kind of information is vital. A fall for a senior can be the catalyst of decline for them. So it's very important to have quick response. And they'll be able to get a sense, did the person just stumble a bit, or did they actually fall? What's the significance of the fall? And can start to call 911 right away if that's what's required. So we're testing this out in an innovation hub and lab space down at one of our campuses that's embedded at McMaster University in a simulated apartment. And then our plan is to working with our industry partners, put this out in some of the senior centers in the area. So that's one example. We're doing some other work in crane with some crane companies to put sensors. With a crane operator, if they sort of drop a load or a load becomes unstable, it sort of creates a snap to the tension of the wires. When that happens, they actually have to replace the wires. They're no longer meeting safety standards, regulatory standards. Often a crane operator isn't going to let you know if the load tipped a bit and there was a snap in the wires. The companies usually don't own their own cranes. There's crane contract operators that operate and maintain them. So we're working with one now to put sensors in that senses that. Senses speed, velocity. It sends a message to them. They track that on single pane of glass. And then they're able to get out there and inspect the crane and replace the cables that are there. So there's just a few examples. There's many more that we're working on, but just a couple.
Any questions for our panelists that we want to start with? Right? Sorry, in the back there.
I just want to see some more use cases. But I do have a question about the frameworks that you use. There seems to be a lot of different frameworks out there. This is Barry from Quinny Healthcare. There seem to be a lot of frameworks out there that you can choose for AI. And I'm wondering, do you focus on one, or do you use many of them?
Who wants to go first?
I can take a stab at it. So when we started, we had kind of the luxury of spending a few months figuring out what the governance structure was going to be for the program. And as a result, what we did is we sort of reached out to a few different consulting firms and borrowed some of their work, and then kind of created our own on top of it. So what was really important was to create we called it a gain impact model, which was essentially a way to identify the opportunities in the organization and then prioritize them accordingly. Because once you open it, you can't possibly deliver on everything that comes your way. So you want to try to, for us, it was all about trying to get the opportunities or the use cases that were sort of high gain, high impact, or we called it, essentially a first learning. So if it was something that you knew wasn't going to generate high gain, high impact immediately, but you were going to learn a lot from, and then you can move into that. Those would be the two that we would always look for. So we built this gain impact model, and then in terms of a structure is we kind of built a delivery model around that, because a lot of the time with AI experiments is you go in, you try it, and it fails. So you have to be able to pivot very quickly without throwing the use case away, because it's often not the problem, it's how you're asking the questions of that problem. And so we built a framework around that, and I'm happy to separately really share some of the work that we've done. We've got a bunch of templates and things like that we have found it to be very beneficial.
Maybe I'll comment on that. What we're experiencing, and maybe over time we'll start to coalesce around some frameworks, but as we're doing the different kinds of initiatives or implementations, each of them have a fairly unique architecture or structure that we put around it. So it's not necessarily one framework or one set of hardware, software, tools, technology, and processes. But what we are doing, and I was chatting with some folks, is really shifting our focus to what's really articulating clearly the business challenge, and then using design thinking processes and methodologies, wrapping the technology solutions around that. So how you do AI and IoT and whatever you combine with it in agriculture will be very different than what you do in healthcare versus advanced manufacturing, just because their environments are very different and the structures are quite different. And so we're sort of tailoring and wrapping around the right kind of suites of technologies, hardware, software, people, processes, and data structures, depending on the use case. I think, or I could speculate, 24 months from now, we may be able to be in a state where we can say, okay, here's the 3 or 4 different kind of models, but it's premature at this point to do that.
Yeah, and we're kind of following a similar approach. We've got an innovation council that takes in a number of the ideas and then starts to put some semblance of how do we want to, where's the ROI, where do we think the ROI is going to come from? And if we get it to a place where one of our biggest challenges is also just mind time of leaders and sponsorship. Mm-hmm. So it's great to join a room and come up with ideas, but then to actually follow it through in an innovative environment, in an agile environment, is a lot of time that they're not used to. They like to throw the idea and then say, okay, now you take care of it. But in order for this to be successful, what we're finding is that first several hours of thinking around it is where we've put more structure. So that's where we leverage the lab, the mind mapping, and the facilitation around how to take that idea into something that is tangible and then put some technology around it is where we are investing in right now. And really working with what we call is finding that enthusiastic sponsor that is going to be there beyond just the idea and actually is willing to work with us as we're going through iterations and allowing us to pivot, because you don't get it right on the first time, right? You start to see, okay, this is going down this path. We need actually this set of information, these set of folks involved in it, and be willing to kind of work with us on that journey. So we look for that combination of idea, ROI, plus a sponsor that's got patience to work with us.
Yeah, patient, enthusiastic sponsor. That's always critical.
So great. This is Joe Pucciarelli. So great comments, Bipasha and Cari. You both, highlighted that you got green lights on projects based on a return on investment. In your case, Bipasha, or the CFO saying, I'm going to make a simplifying assumption, Cari. You got to pay for the whole project this year, and if you do that, then I'll give you the money. So putting all the burden on you, but anyhow, how do you get to that education process, the art of what's possible? Bipasha, you just kind of touched on that a little bit, of finding an enthusiastic sponsor, but it's even earlier than that. It's, do folks understand what the technology can do and what is the art of the possible? So as a person who has to exist on that boundary between technology and business outcomes, how are you, working with your colleagues to, I don't want to say educate, maybe is too strong a word, but help them understand the art of what's possible?
Let me start, because actually Cari and I worked together in a previous world where it's that, as IT practitioners, developing that partnership with the business. So when I joined the LCBO 3 years ago, the partnership that existed was very, I'll call it, old school. It was the business defines, do this. They would, dole out, we started to call them job jar activities. Go do this, enhance this, go do that. And so there really wasn't that partnership to really explore. Part of it was finding the right people, right, that would then have the dialogue with the business. And so we spent time understanding what the business problems were, like the ones that we could say, you know what, how do we partner and bring in some good speakers, sometimes some good partners from a technology perspective, especially when it came to finance and an RPA. We're just about to start that POC. So actually showing them, and sometimes simple videos work too, like, spend 20 minutes with us, and we're going to show you a video, and the art of the possible starts to come forward. So in finance especially, it's a lot of manual activities to show what a bot can do, and take and a lot of it we vet beforehand, because you don't want it to be a sales pitch from technology companies. So we do a lot of vetting in advance and working with our technology providers and our partners to say, you know what, that's not going to resonate. That just looks like a sales pitch. How do you adjust that to make it real for the business problem that they're solving? So we try really hard to understand what the business problem is, and then see if we can show them the art of the possible. And then you need a couple of wins. You need to kind of build enough of those relationships where one or two of the folks say, yes, that worked, and then they become your advocates on your behalf. That's what we found here. We had a similar kind of approach at Canadian Tire a number of years ago, and I think Cari certainly evolved it since then.
Yeah, for us, like I said, we started this journey in September. In October, I was asked to go speak to our board of directors, and so that was the beginning of really gaining traction from the top. And through that speaking, I wasn't talking about what we've done, because we hadn't done anything yet, but it was really around what's out there, what are other retailers do, and it was kind of getting rid of the hype. It wasn't like we need tens of millions of dollars to develop something. It was more like we can really drive efficiencies and effectiveness by some investment, but not a ton. And then what we did was, every time we built, and essentially, like in the beginning, it was all bots. Every time we built a bot, we would actually do a past and a future video. So for every single one. And we would take that, because a lot of the time you're kind of working with mid-level management. But we would take that and we would show it to the senior executives and basically say, look, this is what your people used to do, because a lot of the time they don't know. This is what they're doing now. And we now have a library of these kind of videos, and sometimes they'd be animated, sometimes they'd actually be the people that were doing it. So we learned how to market our story really well, and then we took all of that and we put together a video that we use internally and externally, really, to talk about what we do. And sadly, that's kind of, that was the way to get the traction within the organization. It was kind of grassroots.
So again, you're effectively giving us a terrific example of how, as a senior IT leader, you're functioning as IT's CMO.
Yes, it is exactly from the day one where they were talking about that. And so just the group that I lead isn't in IT. So a lot of us grew up in IT, but they've separated us. We are our own business unit, reporting into a line of business and essentially into each one of the banners. But I would say 50% of my time is spent in change management, which is a lot of marketing. Yeah.
What about you, Tracy? Are you becoming a CMO as well?
I don't sit within corporate IT. I did when I first came over to Mohawk College from working in the government. And we built the role that I'm in because there was a big gap in terms of getting the right technology supports. And technology, as we all know, we've been talking about, is accelerating so quickly. And the demand for a talent pipeline of students with those skills is knocking at our door every day. So I work with the Vice President of Academic, working with the Dean's Council and all our researchers. One thing I will comment on, though, we do work with industry. So if you think from a small to medium enterprise, we work with a lot of small to medium, let's take manufacturing. If you go into a small to medium manufacturer, they can't typically afford the kinds of investments that would be needed. to bring in these technologies. And for them, unless they can see a quick return or a process efficiency, something that will differentiate them quickly, they're not going there. So there's a group we work with called MTech, and they're a sort of an association for manufacturers. They're based in Burlington, Ontario, and they work with more the small to medium. What they've done, which is really interesting, is a bit of a campaign to build out some demonstrations where you take legacy manufacturing equipment and you kind of bolt on some innovative tech, very, very inexpensive. Sensors were really not that expensive. And they connect it with artificial intelligence or single panes of glass, and they'll go in there and set those up. That's so vital to do those kinds of things, or whether you're doing it within the company or you're doing it through associations. Because big companies, that's one thing, but we have a huge amount of small to medium enterprises in Canada and Ontario, and a lot of times they're not going to get a return on investment right away. They need to sink some investment, and they're not going to rip and replace old legacy operating systems. So it's illustrating for them the art of the possible of being able to integrate new technology with their legacy systems and doing some proofs of concept. We have a lot of those now, and we show the art of the possible. We have demonstration sites in our Internet of Things labs and IoT labs, cybersecurity labs, our manufacturing labs. But beyond Mohawk, I think the conversation is very important with the companies out there and helping them along that journey to figure out how are they going to do this with old infrastructure.
Yeah, painting that picture of the art of the possible through, whether it's through an association like that or selling and marketing internally, critical. I think there were a few other questions. Sorry, in the back there.
It's Ann from Hexo. I'm wondering if you're leaving some room. I mean, sounds like you're under the gun to deliver specific projects that have identified ROI. And if I think of back in my data science days and when I work with others, there's this kind of space you need to give to explore and analyze. And, myself and some of these folks really enjoy kind of looking at all the data and swimming in it and trying to find some correlations before you do anything else. Is there a little bit of a budget and time to do that up front before you identify the projects that you need? Or is it you already need to have the project in mind and the ROI already identified? That's my question. Number two, I just want to say awesome, all women on the panel, fantastic.
I kind of thought the same thing when I saw it. I was like, this is amazing. I don't think I've ever been on a panel with all women, so kudos to the organizers. But in terms of the how we do it, we kind of use the innovation theory as our guideline. So if you think about, sort of 70, 20, and 10, and 10 being truly transformational, 70 kind of being incremental, and 20 being adjacent, we try to slot our work into that. And so the 70 being incremental is essentially where we know we're going to get the quick wins and where we know we're going to continue to fund our business. Because if I'm not bringing in the benefits, I really won't get money again next year. But we absolutely leave room, time, people dedicated to that 10% right at the top of the triangle to really look at transformational ideas, spend time with the data, play with the technologies. We look at a lot of external partnerships and small startups across Canada and try to partner with them and academic institutions. So all of that is kind of wrapped into that top 10%.
So is that where... I'm not sure who mentioned it when we talked about this in advance, sort of with those acclaimed AI centers in Toronto, Montreal, are you working with them as well in that to kind of drive out that 10%?
Yeah, so we've partnered with something called the Creative Destruction Lab, which is, I don't know, is anyone familiar with it? Some of you are. So it's for those that are not, it is kind of sponsored through University of Toronto Rotman. And essentially, they've established these creative destruction labs across Canada and actually in Oxford and Paris and New York now. And really it's a way for small startups, they have to apply to this program. If they get in, they come in for a year of mentoring through entrepreneurs that have exited their businesses for significant amounts of money. And every couple of months they come in and they present to this panel audience of a combination of mentors and corporate partners. And people, it's like a dragon's den, and people vote whether or not they stay in. So what I found through, this is our second year with CDL, and what I found through that is I'm exposed literally every 2 months to 50 to 70 different startups. And sometimes it's not obvious that there's a connection, but if you kind of just think about it abstract and try to connect the dots, there's often 5 to 10 conversations that we'll have after and bring them in. And now at this point, we're working with 3 different ones. So it's proven to be a really effective way for us to get visibility to what's going on. And I like the idea that it's Canada for the most part, and we're supporting the Canadian economy.
Yeah.
LCBO is doing the same thing. Our innovation lab is in Waterloo in a similar kind of space where it's all startups, and they have the same kind of opportunities. And it is amazing just by physically being in the space, by physically being part of those already organic processes and systems, what it generates.
By show of hand, who else is working with, whether it's a Mohawk college type or one of these AI labs? Anybody else engaging in that similar fashion? Couple, yeah.
Yeah, if I can add or comment on that too. So for companies, I think there's great opportunities to work with colleges and universities and partner. A lot of universities are also doing they're recognizing the need to be partnering with industry to apply technologies in that kind of innovation space, because sometimes you don't get that ROI right away. You need that time for the company to build some collective competence or understanding of the technologies, kind of cut your teeth on some new projects and initiatives, and there's not an immediate return on investment. So the opportunity working with higher ed is they're all growing or already have pretty rich ecosystems of tech, and work with the tech industry that you can try some of those things in a really low risk way. And then later kind of move down a journey. With that also, there's the ability to access research grants. And the federal government, I know in particular, is super invested in trying to build out technology innovation in Canada. And following the election now, there's just daily calls now coming out for new research projects. And they will only give them if there's an industry higher ed partnership. And they're looking for pan-Canadian partnerships. So lots and lots of great opportunity out there. And, if you have to demonstrate an ROI quickly, this may be a route to go where you can have that space to explore and learn as you go.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, we're forming 2 different partnerships with 2 different universities, as well as an incubator hub. So it becomes exactly what Tracy said, a really low cost venture for us, but we're getting access to PhD researchers, PhD data scientists, the incubator hub that has access to a whole bunch of emerging technologies. And what we bring essentially is the data and the problem. And then together we try to solve it. So it's proven to be a really great way of getting some progress.
That's super interesting. I think we're getting close to the end. So a couple of final questions from the audience, and here in the middle. Sorry.
I'd like to know how you might be developing a data science hub and some of the things you're moving forward in that area. Like, how are you investing in this? How are you, because it's kind of out of the heart of starting AI, and it looks like I got somebody hooked. Okay.
Yeah, I can start. And that's a great question, and that's been my mission over the last several months. Is we have an IoT hub and we've got a cyber hub, but we need an AI hub, our data science hub. So we're building one. So I just got approval to build out a space. The cool thing is we already have a lot of the tech. We have Azure space and AWS space. We have access to all the IBM suite of tools for Watson, Cognos, and all of those. We have academic programs that are graduate certificates, so they're 8 months in advanced data science. And we get a lot of university students that come to us for those because they go out to the job market, don't kind of have the practical hands-on skills, and a lot of people that are new to Canada. So they can get those skills, and when they do that, they earn micro-credentials that say, they know how to use, machine learning for Microsoft, or they know how to use, IBM's Watson or whatever the tools are. But the hub is so vital and important to have, so it's a space where there'll be students working with faculty, working with industry, working with partners to develop chatbots and AI engines, doing advanced data analytics, and wrapping around that, though, the ideation process and design thinking, because you can't sort of do one without the other. And pretty excited that over the next couple of months we'll have that up and running. In that, just like in our other spaces, we'll then have demonstration projects, and those will be with the industry, the company, but the tech industry, so whether it's the IBMs, the Ciscos, the Intels, the whoever's that are there, and we can show people. We have about 50 different businesses that come through every month to tour our facilities, and it's important that they see it. That's the education, that's the seeding, the Canadian thinking around that, and when they can see the art of the possible, that's fantastic. So very excited that we're going to be able to have that. And we couldn't do it without the tech industry stepping up to work with us to provide that kind of technology in those spaces.
So in a corporate environment, what's your approach to talent acquisition, to building that AI automation-centric hub?
Yeah, our data challenge is not as sexy as getting to a data science hub right now. We have got foundational data challenges. And so what folks are starting to understand, and it comes back to how do you get people educated, how do you get your business partners on board with money that they need to spend on some of the non-sexy stuff. They want to do this fun stuff, but guess what? We've got fundamental data challenges. We need to get our data right. And so what this is doing is allowing us those examples of where you want to do this, but guess what? We can't even find what are all the wines that are kosher right now. So that is allowing us actually to re-engage, because we've been talking about master data management and governance of data, but nobody wants to listen to that. No one gets excited about that. So these have become examples of if you want to do this, you kind of need to help us on this journey first, right, which is not sexy. But what we're building is a really good momentum right now, and I'm actually very excited as part of our strat plan, where PIM, Product Information Management, is at the top from the business now. And that's taken us a while to get there, because that's not the fun and sexy stuff. They want to go to, all of the other opportunities. So in terms of talent, that's another, we were chatting this morning about it. I would say, you talk about our roles as IT leaders being marketeers these days. Attracting talent is probably our top challenge. And working in an environment in a government crown corporation, we've got salary boundaries that we have to respect. So a lot of these, the Innovation Lab is actually becoming a feeder for us to hire some great talent. So our Innovation Lab works with the University of Waterloo, so we hire them as co-op students, and now we've got a funnel of great talent that sees how we are using technology, and they're excited to work with us. So we've had actually the first cohort of students where we've got 2 students now that we've been able to hire full-time that are playing key roles in our organization. So a lot of these approaches is how we're able to attract talent. They want to see that you're doing cool, interesting work. And so we do want to showcase that. We're partnering with different schools, trying to get out there. And again, this is all new for us. Like, we did not have co-op programs within the organization before. So I can't stress the importance of kind of being out there and helping to have your brand become something that people do think of when it comes to innovation and technology, because to hire the best technical strength, they want to know that they're going to do cool work.
Yeah. Interesting. Any final comments there, Cari?
Yeah, I mean, our challenge has always been that the data scientists across Canadian Tire are in different pockets, and often they're solving the same problem, but they don't know. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to, back to your question on the hub, we've tried to create a bit of a center of excellence. So we do have a hub and spoke model where similar to what we've done with automation. We've tried to do that for the data science community. So what we're launching actually this week, which I'm so excited about, is something called an Algo Vault. And really that's a way, there's been all these algorithms that have been built over the last few years across the company, and no one really knows what the algorithms do, what problems they're solving, what the source code looks like. And if someone leaves with that IP on their laptop, well then, too bad for us. So we've built this Algo Vault. We're piloting it, but it will go into market for the entire data science community. And it will be a place for Canadian Tire ultimately to store its IP and for both business and technical users to really understand what is available. So before we go to market, before we go to buy something, let's look at what we've already developed, what problems we've already solved. Is there components of that, those data models that you can reuse to solve for another problem? So that's the beginning of kind of bringing that community together in a pretty structured way, and we'll continue to evolve that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I'm not going to go work anywhere where there's no Algo Vault. You need an Algo Vault, or you're not going to be able to attract talent 5 years from now. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic. We're kind of out of time, so we're going to move on to the next topic, which is future of work. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic. It's great. Thank you so much.